Welcome once again to Plant Physiology, Unit 6, Session 2, Transpiration. And by the close of this session, students should be able to explain the importance of water, define transpiration, explain why it occurs in plants, follow the pathway that water takes through plants from roots uptake to evaporation of leaf cell surfaces. Describe how the driving force for water movement and any resistances to its flow through the plant are the two major components controlling rates of transpiration. Then describe how environmental conditions alter rates of transpiration. Explain how the plant is able to alter rates of transpiration. So the importance of water to vascular plants. Before we continue, answer these questions. Why do you drink water, or how important is water to you? And why do we water plants in pots or in the garden or irrigation field? Water makes up about 70 to 90% of the plant's body. Non-woody plants such as vegetables have the highest proportion of their bodies made up of water. It has been estimated that for every gram of organic matter synthesized by a plant, about 500 grams of water is absorbed by the roots, transported through the plant, and lost to atmosphere by transpiration. So slight imbalances in this flow of water from the soil to the atmosphere is referred to as the soil-plant atmosphere continuum, and this can result in water deficits and severe malfunction of many cellular processes. Therefore, every plant must delicately balance its water uptake and water loss. This balancing is a major challenge to plants. For photosynthesis to take place, each plant needs to draw carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. However, uptake of carbon dioxide also exposes them to water loss and threat of dehydration, since stomata must open. Similarly, closing stomata will prevent carbon dioxide uptake as well, which could also lead to starvation. Water is important to plants because it makes up the matrix and medium in which most biochemical reactions essential for the plant's life takes place. The structure and properties of water also influence the structure and properties of proteins, membranes, nucleic acid, and other cellular constituents such as dissolved solids. So water serves as a medium of transport, hydrate solutes, medium of biochemical reaction as stated earlier, a structural component of the plant, and a raw material for photosynthesis, among other things. By now, you should appreciate how water loss from aerial parts of the plant can be disastrous. Transpiration is the loss of water from the aerial parts of a plant in the form of water vapor. It occurs mainly in the leaves while their stomata are open for the passage of carbon dioxide and oxygen during photosynthesis. As we know, water is usually absorbed by roots from the soil and transported as a liquid to the leaves through the xylem. So in the leaves, the stomata allow water to escape as a vapor and carbon dioxide to enter the leaf for photosynthesis. Do you know that of all the water absorbed by plants, less than 5% remains in the plant for growth and storage following growth? That is, most of the water absorbed by plant or roots is transpired. So this lesson will explain why plants lose so much water, the path water takes through plants, how plants might control for too much water loss to avoid stress conditions, and how the environment plays a role in water loss from plants. So transpiration can also be defined as evaporation of water from the surface of leaf cells in actively growing plants. And the water lost is replaced by additional absorption from the soil by roots, leading to a continuous column of water in the plant xylem. Therefore, the process of transpiration provides the plant with evaporative cooling, nutrients, carbon dioxide entry, and water to provide plant structure. Movement of water from the soil to the atmosphere. The rate of transpiration in any plant depends on the water potential gradient from the soil to the atmosphere and the resistances to its movement through the plant. So water enters the roots and travels through the cortex and endodermal layers of cells to reach the xylem, where water ascends to the leaf. If not used in the plant, it evaporates. So if water loss is greater than the uptake, air bubbles can form in the xylem. So plants reduce water loss by closing their stomata, developing thick cuticles, or by possessing leaf hairs to increase the boundary layer. Stomata are quick to respond to environmental signals to protect the plant from losing too much water, but still allowing in enough carbon dioxide to drive photosynthesis. So the major path for water movement into plants is from the soil to roots. Water enters near the tip of a growing root, the same region where root hairs grow. Remember, we saw this morphology and anatomy of vascular plants. The surface of the root hairs must be in close contact with the soil to access soil water. Water from air spaces in the soil diffuses into the root, where it can take at least 3 different pathways to eventually reach the xylem, the conduit located at the interior of the root that carries soil water to the leaves. Can you guess the 3 pathways water can take in the root? Once water has entered a root hair, it must move across the cortex and endodermis before it reaches the xylem. Water takes the path of least resistance through a root to reach the xylem. One of the pathways water can take in the root is the apoplastic pathway. In the apoplastic pathway, the water molecules stay between cells in the cell wall region, never crossing membranes or entering a cell. The other 2 pathways are collectively referred to as cellular pathways. The cellular pathways require the water molecules to actually move across a membrane. The first cellular pathway is the transmembrane pathway, where water moves from cell to cell across membranes. The water leaves one cell by crossing its membrane and re-enters another cell by crossing its membrane as well until it reaches the xylem. The second cellular pathway is the symplastic pathway. The symplastic pathway takes the water from cell to cell using the intercellular connections called the plasmodesmata or plasmodesma, which is simpler. Plasmodesmata are membrane connections between adjacent cells, regardless of their pathway. Once the water has traversed or crossed the cortex, it must now cross the endodermis. The endodermis is a layer of cells with a waxy lining called the Casparian strip that stops water movement between cells. At this point, water is forced to move through the membranes of endodermal cells, creating a sieving effect. From the endodermal cells, the water freely enters the xylem cells, where it joins the fast-moving column of water or transpiration stream toward the leaves. The xylem is probably the longest part of the pathway that takes on its way to the leaves of a plant. However, it is also the path of least resistance, with about 1 billion times less resistance than cell-to-cell transport of water. Remember, the xylem has tracheids, cells with narrower diameters, and vessels, cells with wider diameters. These are involved in water transport up the plant. Their cell walls contain cellulose and lignin, making them extremely rigid and strong to withstand the forces involved in moving water up the plant, particularly trees. Since the xylem cells contain no membranes, they are considered dead. These cells overlap to create a series of pathways that water can take as it heads to the leaves. Note that there is no single column of xylem cells carrying water. The transpiration stream is the one-way movement of water from the soil into root hairs, across the root into xylem vessels, through root stem and leaf xylem into mesophyll cells by evaporation from mesophyll cell surfaces into leaf air spaces by diffusion from leaf air spaces through stomata into the atmosphere. The movement of water in the transpiration stream is a down a water potential gradient from soil solution to the atmosphere. The transpiration stream is driven by the evaporation of water from mesophyll cell surfaces, each evaporating molecule pulling another one behind it because of the cohesion of water molecules. The pull is transmitted from molecule to molecule in an unbroken chain all the way down to the root. This is the cohesion tension hypothesis or theory. In addition to cohesion, the adhesion of water molecules to the vessel walls and the cellulose molecules in mesophyll cell walls supports the column of water and keeps it from breaking. Mineral ions taken by active transport into root hairs are carried passively in the transpiration stream. The question we want to answer here is, how fast does water move through plants? Transpiration rates depend on two major factors. The first one is the driving force for water movement from the soil to the atmosphere, and the second is the resistances to water movement in the plant. So the driving force for transpiration is the difference in water potential between the soil and the atmosphere surrounding the plant. This difference creates a gradient forcing water to move toward areas with less water. The drier the air around the plant, the greater the driving force is for water to move through the plant, and the faster the transpiration rate. Units of factors affecting transpiration explain further on how changes in the environment alter this driving force. However, the atmosphere surrounding the plant is drier than the surfaces of leaves. The latter will lose water to the atmosphere. The leaf surfaces, after losing water, will have to replace the loss by taking water from cells inside the leaves. The loss in the leaf cells will be replaced from water in the branches. This gradient or water potential differences will continue to the root hairs, which will replace their water lost to the xylem by taking water from the soil. Now you appreciate the soil plant atmosphere continuum we talked about earlier. The resistances. There are three major resistances to the movement of water out of a leaf, and these are cuticle resistance, stomata resistance, boundary layer resistance. These resistances slow water movement. Therefore, if any of these resistances is greater to water movement, transpiration rate will also be slower. These factors are discussed in detail in units 3 and 4. However, a simple equation describing how these factors alter transpiration rate is given as transpiration into bracket water potential of a leaf minus water potential of the atmosphere over the resistance. And units for this equation are moles of water loss per leaf area per time. That is mole per cm cube per time, or mole cm cube per second. The numerator is a gradient of water potential between the plants and the atmosphere, while the denominator is the resistances by cuticles, stomata, and boundary layer. With this equation, it is easy to predict rates of transpiration. For instance, anytime the numerator is increased, the rate of transpiration becomes faster and vice versa. Similarly, if the denominator increases, this implies that there is greater resistance and thus slower transpiration. Cavitation. Plants are most susceptible to cavitation when transpiration rates are extremely high. Cavitation is the filling of a xylem vessel or trachea with air. It is also known as an embolism or airlock. Remember that during transpiration, the column of water is being pulled out of the plant by evaporation at the leaf cell surface. When this pulling of water out of the plant becomes greater than the ability of the water molecules to stay together, the column of water breaks. Using sound sensing equipment, one can actually hear a click when the water molecules split from one another. Unique structural characteristics help the plant contain the air bubble so that it does not totally disrupt water movement of the plant. Plants are particularly sensitive to cavitation during the hottest part of the day, when there is not enough water available from the soil to keep up with the demand for water while it is evaporating off the leaf surface. It should be noted, however, that Cavitation also occurs under freezing conditions. This is because the solubility of gas in ice is very low. Hence, the gas comes out of solution when the xylem sub-freezes. How then do plants minimize cavitation? Plants avoid cavitation or minimize its damage through the following mechanism. Xylem cells possess pits or tiny holes that allow liquid water transport but do not allow the gas bubble to escape. This structural characteristic helps the gas bubble in one cell so the other xylem cells can continue to transport water up the plant. Water detours around any xylem cell containing an air bubble through the pits as well. The gas bubble redissolves into liquid water when the pooling of water through the xylem is reduced, particularly during the night when water is not being pulled out of the leaf via transpiration because the stomata are closed. Xylem tracheids with narrower diameters compared to vessels with wider diameters avoid cavitation because the column of water in each cell with a narrow diameter is better able to resist bubble formation or rupture. The importance of transpiration in vascular plants. So as stated earlier, in actively growing plants, water continuously evaporates from the surface of the leaf cells exposed to air. This water is replaced by additional absorption of water from the soil. Thus, liquid water extends through the plant from the soil water to the leaf surface where it is covered from a liquid into a gas through the process of evaporation. The cohesive properties of water allow the column of water to be pulled up through the plant as stated as water molecules are evaporating at the surfaces of the leaf cells. You should note that cohesion of water molecules refers to hydrogen bonding between adjacent water molecules. Hence, the process of pulling of water up the plant has been termed the cohesion theory ascent of sap in plants. Transpiration is a necessary evil. Even though water loss can be disastrous to a plant, transpiration plays other useful roles or allows leaves to perform other roles. These include evaporative cooling, transport of minerals, carbon dioxide assimilation, and water uptake. Evaporative cooling: as water evaporates or converts from a liquid to vapor at the leaf surface and atmosphere interface, heat is released. This exothermic process uses energy to break the strong hydrogen bonds between liquid water molecules. The energy used to vaporize water from leaf surfaces is taken from the leaf and given to the water molecules that have been converted to highly energetic gas molecules. These gas molecules and their associated energy are released into the atmosphere, thereby cooling the plant. Do you know that about 80% of the cooling effect of a shade tree is from the evaporative cooling effect of transpiration? This benefits both plants and humans as well. How do you benefit from evaporative cooling? So nutrients cannot enter the plant body without movement of water up the plant. Water also moves up the plant by the transpiration pool. The water that enters the roots contains dissolved nutrients, which are vital to plant growth. Hence, it is thought that transpiration enhances nutrient uptake into plants as well. Thus, transpiration helps to move minerals up the roots through the xylem to the leaves. Similarly, the sugars produced in the leaves are moved throughout the plant through the phloem to other parts where they are required in the medium of water brought in by transpiration. So when a plant is transpiring, its stomata are open, allowing gas exchange between the atmosphere and the leaf. Open stomata allow water vapor to leave the leaf, but at the same time also allow carbon dioxide to enter. Carbon dioxide is needed for photosynthesis to operate. Remember, carbon dioxide is one of the raw materials for photosynthesis. Unfortunately, much more water leaves the leaf than carbon dioxide enters for three reasons. First, water molecules are smaller than carbon dioxide molecules. Therefore, water molecules move to their destination faster. That is, water molecules are transpired faster than carbon dioxide uptake. Second, carbon dioxide is only about 0.036% of the atmosphere, but it is rising and may continue to rise. Hence, the gradient for its entry into the plant is much smaller than the gradient for water molecules moving from a hydrated leaf into a dry atmosphere. Third, carbon dioxide has a much longer distance to travel to reach its destination in the chloroplast from the atmosphere compared to water, which only has to move from the leaf cell surface to the atmosphere. This disproportionate exchange of carbon dioxide and water leads to a paradox. The larger the stomata opening, the easier it is for carbon dioxide to enter the leaf to drive photosynthesis. However, this large opening will also allow the leaf to lose large quantities of water and face the risk of dehydration or water deficit stress. Plants that are able to keep their stomata slightly open will lose fewer water molecules for every carbon dioxide molecule that enters. Thus, these plants will have greater water use efficiency. Plants with greater water use efficiencies are better able to withstand periods when water in the soil is low. As we have seen earlier, less than 5% of water absorbed by the roots is retained in plants, the rest is transpired. Although only less than 5% of water taken up by roots remains in the plant, water is vital for plant structure and function. The retained water is important for driving biochemical processes and creates tugel as well, so that the plant can stand without bones as invertebrates. So water maintains the tugel pressure in cells, much like air inflates a balloon, giving form to the non-woody plant parts. Turgidity is important so the plant can remain stiff and upright and gain a competitive advantage when it comes to light. That is why we water garden seedlings, especially when newly transplanted or in the dry season, to keep them turgid. Turgidity is important for the functioning of the guard cells also, which surround the stomata and regulate water loss and carbon dioxide uptake. Turgidity is also the force that pushes roots through the soil. So, in review, we know that transpiration is not simply a hazard of plant life. We can say it is the engine that pulls water out from the roots to supply photosynthesis as 1 to 2% of the total. Bring minerals from the roots for biosynthesis within the leaf and cools